I'm Angela, 34, and I built my dream life from nothing. While my parents always favored my brother Jason, I worked tirelessly to create my success. My beach house represents years of sacrifice and determination. Never did I imagine my family would betray my trust so completely. When Jason called saying, "We're moving in Friday," I was stunned. Then my security app flashed, "Motion detected, trespassing recorded." Before I continue this unbelievable story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe to see how I handled this family invasion and protected what was rightfully mine. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Minnesota with parents who had very specific ideas about life and success. My father worked as an accountant at the same firm for 30 years, and my mother was a high school English teacher. They believed in stability, predictability, and following a conventional path. That mindset worked well for them, but I always dreamed of something different. From early childhood, my brother Jason seemed to be the golden child. 3 years younger than me, he received endless praise for mediocre accomplishments, while my achievements were often overlooked. When Jason made the junior varsity basketball team, my parents threw a party. When I was accepted into the National Honor Society, they simply nodded and said, "That's nice, Angela." The disparity in how we were treated wasn't subtle. Jason could do no wrong while I was constantly pushed to do better. Looking back, I realized this treatment shaped both of us in profound ways. It made me fiercely independent and determined to prove myself, while Jason developed a sense of entitlement that would later cause problems for everyone. When I was 16, I started reading books about real estate investment and financial independence. I would share interesting concepts with my parents at dinner, hoping they might encourage this interest. Instead, my father would laugh and say, "Angela, that's not how the real world works. Focus on getting a stable job with benefits." My mother would add, "Those get-rich-quick schemes are for people who don't understand the value of hard work." They weren't bad parents. They loved us and wanted security for our futures. They just couldn't see beyond their own experiences and fears. Their dismissal of my interests only strengthened my resolve to forge my own path. After graduating high school with honors, I received a partial scholarship to the University of Minnesota. My parents contributed what they could, but made it clear that they were saving the bulk of their college fund for Jason, who would need more help than you. Rather than arguing, I worked multiple jobs throughout college, often sleeping just 4 hours a night between classes, work, and studying. I majored in finance with a minor in real estate development, graduating with honors despite my grueling schedule. While most of my classmates were celebrating with family trips or taking time off before job hunting, I immediately started interviewing. I landed an entry-level position at a commercial real estate firm in Minneapolis. The first few years were challenging. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, saving every penny possible. My starting salary barely covered my student loans and living expenses, but I was gaining valuable experience. I volunteered for every project, worked weekends, and absorbed everything I could about property valuation, market trends, and investment strategies. By 26, I had saved enough for a down payment on my first investment property, a small rundown duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. My parents were horrified when I told them about the purchase. "You're going into debt for that dump," my father exclaimed after driving by the property. "You should be saving for a proper home of your own." "This is an investment, Dad," I tried to explain. "I'll live in one unit and rent the other to cover most of the mortgage." My mother shook her head. "What if something breaks? What if you can't find tenants? This is so irresponsible, Angela." Meanwhile, Jason had dropped out of college after changing majors 3 times. He moved back home and worked sporadically at retail jobs that never seemed to last. My parents were endlessly patient with him, covering his car payments and giving him spending money until he figured things out. Despite their lack of support, my duplex investment paid off. I renovated both units myself, learning plumbing and basic electrical work from YouTube videos and weekend workshops at the hardware store. I found reliable tenants for the second unit, and the rental income covered 70% of my mortgage. 2 years later, I leveraged the equity in the duplex to purchase a small 4-unit building. By 30, I had built a modest but growing portfolio of investment properties across Minneapolis and St. Paul. I was working 60-hour weeks between my day job, which I had been promoted in twice, and managing my properties. The hard work was paying off financially, but I rarely took time for myself. That changed when I turned 32. I had just closed on a profitable property sale and decided it was time for something that was just for me, not an investment, but a reward for years of sacrifice. I began looking at coastal properties, dreaming of a place where I could decompress from the intensity of my work life. That's when I found it, my beach house. It wasn't actually on the beach, but on a bluff overlooking the ocean in a small coastal town in North Carolina. The property was significantly undervalued because it needed extensive renovation. The previous owner had passed away, and the heirs just wanted a quick sale. The location was breathtaking with panoramic ocean views and a private path down to a secluded cove. I paid $280,000 for the house and spent another $200,000 on renovations, bringing my total investment to $480,000. I hired contractors for the major structural work, but did much of the interior design and finishing work myself, flying back and forth from Minnesota over weekends and holidays. The renovation process was challenging, but deeply fulfilling. Every decision from the open floor plan to the floor-to-ceiling windows maximizing the ocean view was mine. I designed a home office overlooking the water where I could work remotely. I created a spacious deck where I imagined hosting friends for sunset dinners. This wasn't just another investment property. It was the manifestation of all my hard work, a tangible symbol of what I had achieved despite the doubts and dismissals. As the beach house neared completion, my relationship with my family became increasingly strained. My success seemed to trigger a mix of emotions in my parents. There was some pride, yes, but also discomfort, and perhaps even resentment that I had defied their expectations and warnings. Jason's situation, meanwhile, had grown more complicated. He had married his girlfriend Laura after she became pregnant with their first child. They now had 2 kids, ages 4 and 2, and lived in a small apartment. Jason worked as a sales associate at an electronics store, but his income barely covered their expenses. My parents were helping them financially, a fact they mentioned with increasing frequency during our conversations. "You know your brother is really struggling," my mother would say during our monthly phone calls. "It's so hard with 2 little ones and rent going up every year." "That's tough," I would respond, already anticipating where the conversation was heading. "It would make such a difference if they had a little help," she would continue. "You've been so blessed with your success." I did help occasionally, sending gifts for the kids and contributing to emergency expenses, but I was wary of becoming a regular source of financial support for Jason. His problems stemmed largely from his own choices, years of drifting impulsive decisions, and an inability to commit to long-term planning. I loved my niece and nephew, but I didn't want to enable the patterns that had led to their precarious situation. The subtle hints about helping Jason became more frequent after I posted photos of my completed beach house on social media. My father called specifically to ask how much the house had cost and how often I planned to use it. When I explained that I would split my time between Minnesota and North Carolina, working remotely when possible, he made a comment that should have warned me of what was coming. "Seems wasteful to have such a big place sitting empty half the time. Families should share their blessings." I dismissed the comment at the time, not realizing it was foreshadowing a situation that would test my boundaries and relationships in ways I never imagined. Last month, I flew to Chicago for a crucial business meeting with potential investors for a new development project. After years of focusing on residential properties, I was expanding into commercial real estate, and this particular meeting could open doors to significantly larger investments. I had prepared for weeks researching market trends and refining my presentation materials. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning, and I had planned to fly to my beach house directly afterward for a well-deserved week of relaxation. Spring was just beginning to warm the Carolina coast, and I had been looking forward to morning walks on the beach and evenings on the deck with a good book. Between property management, investment research, and planning this new business venture, I couldn't remember the last time I had taken more than a weekend off. The investor meeting went exceptionally well. My presentation impressed them, and we discussed potential partnership opportunities over lunch. By mid-afternoon, I had a verbal commitment for partial funding of my new project. Energized by the success, I returned to my hotel to prepare for my flight to North Carolina the following morning. That's when I noticed several text messages from my neighbor at the beach house, Carol, a retired teacher who lived there year-round and kept an eye on my property when I was away. "Angela, are you coming down this week? Saw some family at your place?" Read the first message sent around noon. A second message sent an hour later was more concerning. "There's a moving truck in your driveway. Did you rent your house out?" I immediately called Carol, my stomach tightening with anxiety. "Angela, thank goodness," she answered. I was starting to worry. "There's been activity at your house all day. A man who said he's your brother told me they're moving in. I wasn't sure if you had arranged this." "I absolutely did not," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "No one should be at my house right now." "Well, they have keys," Carol said hesitantly. "I just assumed." I thanked her for alerting me and ended the call, then immediately tried calling Jason. No answer. I tried my parents' number with the same result. I sent text messages to both asking for an urgent callback. While waiting for responses, I checked the security app on my phone. I had installed a comprehensive system after completing the renovations with cameras at all entry points and motion sensors throughout the property. The app showed multiple alerts from throughout the day, all labeled motion detected. I clicked on the most recent alert to view the footage. The video showed Jason carrying boxes through my front door, followed by his wife Laura with a suitcase. In the background, I could see my parents directing movers who were unloading furniture from a truck. They all moved with the casual confidence of people who had every right to be there. As I stared at the screen in disbelief, my phone rang. It was Jason. "Hey, sis," he said cheerfully, as if nothing unusual was happening. "Got your messages. What's up?" "What's up?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Jason, why are you at my beach house with movers?" There was a brief pause before he responded with shocking casualness. "Oh, I was going to call you tonight. We're moving in Friday." Mom already agreed it would be a great solution for everyone. The statement was so absurd that for a moment I wondered if I had misunderstood. "What are you talking about? Nobody agreed to anything about my house." "Come on, Angela," Jason said, his tone suddenly defensive. "You're hardly ever there, and we need a place to live. Our landlord is selling our building, and we have to be out by the end of the month. Mom said you'd be fine with us using the beach house for a while." I took a deep breath, trying to process the magnitude of the assumption. "Jason, that's not Mom's decision to make. The beach house is my property. I never agreed to this." "Well, it's a little late now," he replied, an edge creeping into his voice. "The movers are already unloading our stuff, and we've given notice at our apartment. The kids are excited about living near the beach. You can't just pull the rug out from under us." The entitlement in his voice struck me like a physical blow. In his mind, my property was a resource available to him simply because he needed it. The fact that I had worked for years to afford it was irrelevant. "Stop the movers right now," I said firmly. "You do not have permission to move into my house." "Don't be ridiculous," Jason snapped. "Where are we supposed to go? You know we can't afford rent in this market. You have all this extra space you don't even use. Mom said you'd understand once we explained the situation." Just then, my phone buzzed with another security alert. I switched to the app while keeping Jason on the line and watched in real time as my parents entered my master bedroom, apparently giving a tour to Jason's wife Laura, who was nodding appreciatively. "Are Mom and Dad there? Put them on the phone right now," I demanded. "They're busy directing the movers," Jason replied dismissively. "Look, we can talk about details when you get here. Maybe work out some nominal rent if that makes you feel better. But we're moving in, and that's that." The conversation was becoming surreal. I ended the call after telling Jason firmly that nothing was decided and that I would be arriving tomorrow to sort out this situation in person. I immediately called the airline to change my flight from North Carolina to Minnesota, where I would pick up my car and drive to the beach house directly. The change fee was substantial, but I had no choice. I tried calling my parents repeatedly throughout the evening, but each call went to voicemail. They were deliberately avoiding me. I sent a clear text message. I did not authorize anyone to move into my beach house. This is completely unacceptable. Stop moving things in immediately. My mother finally responded with a text that read simply, "We'll discuss when you arrive. This is for the best. Jason really needs this opportunity." Opportunity. As if my home was some kind of charity I was obligated to provide. As if years of hard work and careful investment should be casually handed over because family. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. But beneath these emotions was something deeper and more painful, a profound sense of betrayal. The people who should respect me the most had instead conspired behind my back to take what was mine, assuming I would eventually relent because of family ties. The next morning, as I prepared to check out of my hotel, my phone buzzed with another security alert. This time, the footage showed Jason and Laura's children running through my carefully designed living room, jumping on furniture I had selected piece by piece. In the background, I could see boxes stacked against walls and unfamiliar furniture already arranged in my space. It was no longer just about unauthorized entry. They were actively taking over my home, transforming it, without any regard for my feelings or rights. The sense of violation was overwhelming. This house represented not just a financial investment, but a deeply personal achievement and sanctuary. Now it was being colonized by the same people who had dismissed my ambitions for years. As I headed to the airport, another security alert appeared on my phone. New user added to security system. Someone had accessed my security settings and added a new authorized user. They were not just entering my home, they were assuming control of it. The anger I felt was white hot, but beneath it was a cold certainty. This would not stand. No matter how uncomfortable the confrontation would be, I would not allow my boundaries to be trampled this way. Not by anyone, not even family. The 15-hour journey from Chicago to my beach house was excruciating. After changing my flight to Minneapolis, I had to wait 3 hours for the next available departure. Upon landing, I drove straight from the airport to my home, stopping only for coffee and gas. The entire time, security alerts kept coming to my phone, each one documenting further invasion of my space. I tried to prepare myself mentally for the confrontation ahead. Part of me hoped that my explicit objections would have sunk in, that perhaps they had realized the inappropriateness of their actions and stopped the move-in process. But the continued security alerts confirmed they were proceeding as if my protests meant nothing. As I finally approached the coastal town in the early evening, my anxiety peaked. I had built my life on careful planning and deliberate decisions, but nothing had prepared me for this bizarre situation. How do you confront your own family for essentially attempting to steal your home? Turning onto my street, I immediately noticed the changes. Jason's blue pickup truck was parked in the driveway, loaded with what appeared to be the last of their belongings. My parents' silver sedan occupied my usual parking spot. A child's bicycle that I recognized as belonging to my niece leaned against the garage door. The scene had an air of casual permanence, as if they had lived there for years rather than less than 48 hours. Several neighbors had gathered in small clusters on nearby lawns, watching with poorly disguised interest. Carol, who had alerted me initially, waved from her porch with a concerned expression. This invasion had become a neighborhood spectacle. I parked on the street, took a deep breath, and walked toward my own front door, feeling strangely like an intruder. Before I could insert my key, the door swung open to reveal my mother, her expression a practiced blend of welcome and defensiveness. "Angela, you're here. We were wondering when you'd arrive," she said, as if I were an expected guest rather than the homeowner. Come in, come in. We've got most things arranged already, but there are a few details we should discuss." I stepped into my living room and froze. The transformation was shocking. My carefully selected furniture had been pushed against walls or relocated entirely to make room for Jason's worn sofa and mismatched chairs. The minimalist aesthetic I had created was now cluttered with toys, moving boxes, and unfamiliar decorative items. Family photos I had never seen before had been placed on my mantle, replacing the art pieces I had collected. Jason and Laura were arranging kitchenware in my open-concept kitchen, while their children played loudly in the living room area. My father was mounting a television on a wall that I had deliberately left clear to maintain the ocean view. No one paused in their activities when I entered, as if my presence was incidental. "What is happening here?" I asked, my voice quiet but tense. "I explicitly said you do not have permission to move in." My mother patted my arm condescendingly. "We knew you were upset initially, but we figured once you saw the arrangement, you'd understand. You have all this space you don't use most of the time. Jason and Laura's lease was ending, and this solution just makes sense for everyone." "This isn't a solution. This is an invasion," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This is my home, not a family timeshare. How did you even get in? I never gave any of you keys." My father looked up from his task screwdriver in hand. "We use the spare key you keep in the lockbox for emergencies. Remember when you had us check on the place during that hurricane warning last year? We made copies, then just in case." The casual admission stunned me. They had duplicated my keys without permission, holding on to them for months, apparently waiting for an opportunity like this. "You made unauthorized copies of my keys," I asked, incredulous. "Don't be so dramatic, Angela," my mother interjected. "We're family. Of course we should have access to each other's homes for emergencies." Jason approached from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. My dish towel. "Look, I know this isn't ideal, but we were in a bind. The rental market is impossible right now, especially with our credit situation. This is temporary until we get back on our feet. 6 months max." "6 months," I repeated. "You plan to live in my house for 6 months without even asking me?" "Mom said you'd be fine with it." Jason shrugged, casting a glance at our mother. "She said you'd want to help family in need, especially since you're doing so well financially." I turned to my mother, who avoided my gaze. "Is that true? You told Jason I had agreed to this?" "I said you would agree once you understood the situation," she replied defensively. "And honestly, Angela, I don't see why you're making such a fuss. It's not like you're here most of the time anyway. You're always working in Minnesota. This house just sits empty." "That doesn't mean anyone can just move in without my permission," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "This is my property that I worked for years to afford. I make the decisions about who stays here and when." Laura emerged from the kitchen, her expression a mix of embarrassment and defiance. "We've already given notice at our apartment and enrolled the kids in school here. We can't just undo all that because you're being selfish about sharing." The word selfish hit me like a slap. After years of working 80-hour weeks, after sacrificing vacations and relationships to build financial security after sending money, when Jason had emergencies, I was being called selfish for wanting control over my own property. "This isn't about sharing," I said firmly. "This is about basic respect and boundaries. You don't make life-changing decisions about someone else's property without their consent." My father put down his tools and approached his expression stern, like when he used to lecture me as a teenager. "Angela, I raised you better than this. Family helps family when they're in need. Your brother has children to consider. Where is your sense of responsibility?" "My responsibility." I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. "What about Jason's responsibility to his own family?" "What about your responsibility to respect my boundaries and property rights?" Jason's children had stopped playing and were watching wide-eyed as the adult voices grew tenser. My niece Alice clutched a stuffed animal and stared at me with uncertainty. This awareness momentarily tempered my anger. The children were innocent in this situation, caught in the middle of adult failures. "We should continue this discussion privately," I said, gesturing toward the deck where the children wouldn't hear. My parents, Jason and Laura, followed me outside. The sun was beginning to set over the ocean, the kind of spectacular view that had made me fall in love with this property. But in that moment, I couldn't appreciate it. The sanctuary I had created for myself had been violated, and the people responsible were standing before me, expecting me to accept their actions. "Here's the situation," I began once we were out of earshot of the children. "This is my house. I did not give permission for anyone to move in. The fact that you proceeded anyway after I explicitly told you not to shows an incredible lack of respect." "It's just for 6 months," Jason repeated, as if the time frame was the only issue. "We'll pay what we can toward utilities. It's not like we're asking to live here for free." That's not the point, I replied. The point is that you made this decision without me acted behind my back and then presented it as a fait accompli. My mother stepped forward, her expression hardening. After all we've done for you, Angela, all the sacrifices we made for your education, all the support we gave you growing up, and now that we're asking for one thing, you turn your back on your own family. I almost laughed at the absurdity of her statement. What sacrifices, Mom? You contributed minimally to my education because you were saving for Jason. I worked multiple jobs through college while you covered his changing majors and dropping out. I built this life myself with very little support from any of you. My father's face flushed with anger. That's a very ungrateful attitude. We gave you a stable home values discipline. That's why you've succeeded. Yes, I had a stable home growing up, and I'm thankful for that, I acknowledged. But that doesn't entitle any of you to take over my property whenever you want. Laura, who had been relatively quiet, suddenly spoke up. What about the children? They've already been told they're living here now. They're excited about the beach, the new school. How can you disappoint them like this? It was a calculated emotional appeal using the children as leverage. I addressed her directly, keeping my voice level. I understand this is difficult for everyone, especially the kids. But Jason and you made promises to them that weren't yours to make. That responsibility falls on you, not me. So you're just going to throw us out? Jason demanded, his voice rising. Where are we supposed to go? Back to a city apartment we can barely afford. You'd rather let this big house sit empty most of the year than help your own brother's family. I would have been happy to discuss options if you had approached me honestly, I replied. Maybe we could have worked something out with advance notice, clear boundaries, and proper agreements. But you didn't give me that choice. You conspired behind my back and invaded my home. Invaded, my mother repeated incredulously. Such dramatic language. This is family helping family. Why are you being so heartless? There it was, the accusation that would be repeated many times in the coming days. Heartless, because I dared to maintain boundaries, because I expected basic respect for my property and autonomy. I need all of you to leave, I said firmly. Today, now. My declaration was met with stunned silence, followed by a chorus of protests. You can't be serious, my father blustered. It's almost dark. Where are we supposed to go? We've already moved most of our things, Laura added, panic edging into her voice. We can't just leave. Jason stepped closer, his expression darkening. I'm not uprooting my kids again because you're having a temper tantrum about your precious house. We're staying until we figure out a better solution. His stance was confrontational, almost threatening. In that moment, I realized just how far they were willing to go. They truly believed they had the right to override my decisions about my own property. If you don't leave voluntarily, I said quietly, I will call the authorities and report this as trespassing. I have video evidence of unauthorized entry and documentation that I explicitly denied permission for you to move in. My mother gasped. You would call the police on your own family? What is wrong with you, Angela? You've changed. Success has made you cold and heartless. This isn't about success or money, I replied. This is about respect. You didn't respect me enough to ask permission before taking over my home. You assumed I would give in once confronted with a fait accompli. That's manipulative and wrong. You're destroying this family, my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. All for a house. Is property really more important than your relationship with us? Her question hung in the air, heavy with emotional manipulation. But in that moment of clarity, I recognized that this wasn't about the house at all. It was about a lifetime of boundaries ignored, of my autonomy, dismissed, of the expectation that I would always yield to others' needs while my own were considered secondary. This isn't about the house, I said quietly. This is about respect. And right now, none of you are showing me any. After my firm declaration that everyone needed to leave, the situation escalated rapidly. My family's reactions ranged from stunned disbelief to open hostility. The conversation had reached an impasse with my parents, and Jason refusing to acknowledge the fundamental violation of trust and boundaries. I cannot believe you're being this rigid, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. This isn't how we raised you. Actually, it is, I replied calmly. You raised me to work hard for what I want and to stand up for myself. That's exactly what I'm doing. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app, scrolling through alerts from the past 2 days. I have documented evidence of unauthorized entry. Every motion alert, every door opening, all time stamped and recorded, after I explicitly told you not to enter my property. I turned the phone screen toward them, showing footage of Jason using a copied key to enter my front door, followed by movers bringing in furniture. You were recording us, Jason demanded, his face flushing with anger. That's a violation of privacy. It's a security system in my own home, I corrected him. A home you entered without permission. Legally, that's trespassing. My father stepped forward, his expression a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. You wouldn't really pursue legal action against your own family. This is just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. It's not a misunderstanding when I explicitly said no and you ignored me, I replied. I'm giving you the opportunity to leave voluntarily. You have 1 hour to gather essential belongings. The rest can be collected tomorrow during daylight hours while I supervise. Jason's face contorted with rage. You can't dictate terms like this. We've already moved in. The kids are settled. You've been here less than 48 hours, I pointed out, and again without permission. Where are we supposed to go tonight? Laura asked, her voice trembling slightly. Hotels around here are expensive, especially last minute. I had anticipated this question and had already researched options. There's a Holiday Inn Express 15 minutes from here with vacancy. I called to confirm while driving here. And who's paying for that? Jason demanded. We can't afford hotel rates in a beach town. I took a deep breath. Despite my anger, I didn't want to cause unnecessary hardship, especially for the children. I'll cover 3 nights at the hotel. That should give you time to make alternative arrangements. My offer, intended as a reasonable compromise, was met with scoffs. 3 nights, my mother repeated. That's nothing. Jason and Laura need stability for the children. They need months, not days. That's not my responsibility, I said firmly. I'm willing to help with temporary accommodations while you figure things out, but I am not providing indefinite housing. While this conversation was occurring, I had been texting with my attorney, who advised documenting everything and having witnesses if possible. I decided to call the local security company I had contracted during the house renovation. They provided on-call service for homeowners in the area. I've contacted security to come document the situation, I informed my family. They'll be here in 20 minutes. I suggest you start gathering your overnight essentials before they arrive. My announcement was met with a mix of reactions. My father looked genuinely shocked that I was taking such formal measures. My mother continued crying, now muttering about how I had changed and become cold. Jason stormed back into the house, slamming the deck door behind him. Laura lingered, her expression conflicted. Angela, I want you to know this wasn't my idea, she said quietly. Jason and your parents assured me you had agreed to this arrangement. I never would have uprooted the kids if I'd known. Her admission surprised me. Then why did you continue moving in after I explicitly texted and called saying no? She looked down, avoiding my gaze. Jason said you were just having an initial reaction and would come around. Your parents said the same thing. They all insisted it would be fine once you arrived. Her words confirmed what I had suspected. This wasn't an impulsive decision, but a calculated plan. They had anticipated my objections and decided in advance to ignore them, counting on family pressure to make me relent once confronted in person. Inside the house, I could hear Jason and my parents talking in urgent, hushed tones, occasionally interrupted by the sound of drawers opening and closing. I remained on the deck, giving them space to gather belongings, while maintaining my position. 20 minutes later, a vehicle with the local security company's logo pulled into my driveway. 2 uniformed officers approached the house, and I met them at the front door. Ms. Morrison, I'm Officer Reed, and this is Officer Tanaka. You reported unauthorized occupants on your property. Yes. I confirmed, showing them my identification and property deed, which I had brought with me. My family entered without permission using duplicated keys and began moving in despite my explicit objections. I have security footage documenting everything. The officers listened attentively as I explained the situation. Their presence had an immediate effect on the atmosphere inside the house. Jason stopped his angry muttering, and my parents' demeanor shifted from righteous indignation to embarrassment. Officer Reed addressed everyone professionally. "We understand this is a family matter, but legally Ms. Morrison has sole authority over who can occupy this property. We're here to document the situation and ensure a peaceful resolution." "This is ridiculous," my father protested, though with notably less conviction than before. "Calling security on your own parents. What will the neighbors think?" "They'll think I'm protecting my property rights," I replied calmly. "Which is exactly what I'm doing." Officer Tanaka helped establish a plan for the immediate departure. "We recommend gathering essentials for tonight, then arranging a time tomorrow for collecting the remaining belongings," she said. "We can return tomorrow to oversee the process if necessary." The presence of official witnesses transformed the dynamic entirely. My family's emotional appeals and accusations lost power in the face of legal reality. They began gathering overnight bags with reluctant efficiency. The children, confused and upset by the tension, clung to Laura. I approached them gently, kneeling to their level. "I'm sorry things got confusing," I told them. "You're going to stay at a hotel with a swimming pool tonight. It'll be like a mini vacation, and then you'll find a great new home." My niece Alice looked at me with solemn eyes. "Mommy said this was our new home by the beach." Her innocent statement twisted in my chest, reinforcing how irresponsible my family had been in making promises about my property. "I know, sweetheart, there was a mix-up, but you'll have fun at the hotel, I promise." Within the hour, essential belongings had been packed into overnight bags and loaded into my parents' car and Jason's truck. The security officers documented the state of the house and the departing vehicles, providing me with an official report for my records. As they prepared to leave, my mother made one last emotional appeal. "I hope you're satisfied, Angela. You've chosen property over family. I never thought I'd see the day." I met her gaze steadily. "I haven't chosen property over family, Mom. I've chosen respect over manipulation. There's a difference." She turned away without responding, climbing into the car with my father. Jason and Laura herded the children into the truck, Jason pointedly avoiding looking in my direction. The small procession pulled out of my driveway, leaving an unsettling quiet behind. After the security officers departed, I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by the half-completed invasion of my space. Boxes of unfamiliar belongings sat stacked against walls. Jason's furniture created awkward arrangements around my own pieces. Children's toys lay scattered across the floor. The victory felt hollow. I had protected my boundaries, but at what cost? As the adrenaline of confrontation faded, exhaustion set in. I had been traveling for nearly 20 hours straight and had just endured one of the most emotionally draining experiences of my life. I moved through the house, taking inventory of changes and displacements. In the master bedroom, I discovered Laura's clothes already hanging in my closet, Jason's toiletries arranged in my bathroom. They had truly intended to take over completely, assuming my primary bedroom as their own. The guest rooms had been set up for the children with new bedding and decorations suited to their ages. In what I used as my home office, they had removed my desk to make room for a play area. The systematic rearrangement of my space was thorough and presumptuous. After surveying the damage, I made two immediate decisions. First, I called a locksmith for an emergency appointment that evening to change all the locks. Second, I contacted my attorney to draft a formal notice of trespassing that would legally prevent my family from entering the property without my explicit permission. As I waited for the locksmith, I began the process of reclaiming my space, moving furniture back to its original positions, and gathering scattered belongings into boxes. The physical activity helped channel my turbulent emotions, but the sense of violation lingered. This place that had represented achievement and sanctuary now felt tainted by conflict and betrayal. When the locksmith arrived, he efficiently changed every lock and reprogrammed the electronic entry pad with new codes. I watched with grim satisfaction, knowing that the physical security of my home was being restored. The digital security would come next, with a complete reset of my alarm system to remove the unauthorized user Jason had added. By midnight, exhaustion overwhelmed me. I collapsed into bed physically and emotionally drained, yet my mind continued racing. I questioned whether I had been too harsh, too uncompromising. The hurt expressions of my niece and nephew haunted me. But then I would remember the calculated nature of the invasion, the deliberate disregard for my explicit refusal, and my resolve would strengthen again. This wasn't just about a house. It was about a pattern of disrespect that had existed throughout my life. My achievements dismissed my boundaries, ignored my autonomy, considered secondary to others' needs. For perhaps the first time, I had refused to yield to that pattern, regardless of the emotional cost. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I knew the confrontation wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring the challenge of supervising the removal of their belongings, potentially another round of emotional manipulation and accusations. But I had taken the crucial first step in establishing that my boundaries were real and would be enforced even against family. The house around me was quiet now, but it was a tense silence, a pause between battles rather than peace. The weeks following the confrontation at my beach house were filled with uncomfortable silences, angry messages, and gradual revelations that changed my understanding of family dynamics. The day after the initial confrontation, my family returned to collect their belongings as arranged. I had hired 2 security officers to be present, anticipating potential conflict. Their presence proved valuable as Jason arrived in a combative mood, making snide comments throughout the process. "I hope you're happy in your big empty house all by yourself," he muttered while carrying out boxes. "Real nice to know where your priorities lie." I maintained professional distance, focusing on documenting the removal of items and the condition of my property. My parents were coldly polite, speaking only when necessary. Laura seemed genuinely embarrassed by the entire situation and worked efficiently to gather their things, occasionally whispering apologies when the others weren't within earshot. The children were confused and upset, particularly when toys they had unpacked had to be gathered and reboxed. I made an effort to speak kindly to them, explaining that there had been a misunderstanding between the adults. Their innocent questions, "Why can't we live in the beach house?" and "Are you mad at Daddy?" were painful to answer honestly yet simply. After 8 grueling hours, the last of their belongings was loaded into a rented moving truck. As they prepared to leave, my mother approached me on the driveway, her expression a complex mixture of hurt and indignation. "I want you to know that you've broken this family," she said quietly. "Some things can't be repaired." I met her gaze steadily. "I didn't break anything, Mom." I maintained a boundary that should have been respected from the beginning. "Boundaries," she repeated with disdain. Such cold, clinical language. Family isn't about boundaries. It's about sacrifice and support. Mutual support, I emphasized. Not one person constantly sacrificing for others who take it for granted. She shook her head and walked away without another word, joining my father in their car. The caravan of vehicles, my parents' car, Jason's truck, and the moving van pulled away from my property, leaving me alone with the aftermath. What followed was complete radio silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was as if my entire family had decided I no longer existed. While part of me was relieved to avoid further confrontation, another part felt the weight of their absence. Despite the complexity of our relationships, these were the people who had known me longest, who shared my history. After a week of silence, the campaign began. It started with a vague post on my mother's social media. "Heartbroken when wealth changes a person's values. Money can't replace family." Though I wasn't named, the timing and implications were clear. Jason was more direct. His post included a photo of his children looking sad in a hotel room with the caption, "Homeless because someone values property over family. Blood isn't always thicker than water or money." The comment section quickly filled with sympathetic responses and outraged reactions from extended family members and friends who had only heard their version of events. Soon, distant relatives and family friends began reaching out to me with concerned messages. "Is everything okay with you and your family? I heard there was some disagreement about your beach house. Anything I can do to help mend fences?" These well-meaning inquiries revealed how widely the narrative of my heartlessness had spread. I chose not to engage publicly with these mischaracterizations. Arguing on social media would only escalate the situation and drag more people into what should remain a private family matter. Instead, I responded privately to direct inquiries with a simple statement: "There's been a misunderstanding about boundaries and property rights. I'm hoping we can resolve it privately as a family." 2 weeks after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my cousin Stephanie, with whom I'd been close as a child, but had drifted apart in adulthood. The subject line read simply, "I understand more than you know." In her message, Stephanie shared that she had experienced a similar situation years earlier, when her parents had pressured her to allow her unemployed sister to move into her condo temporarily. That arrangement had stretched into 2 years of tensions-damaged property and strained relationships before she finally enforced boundaries. "I wish I'd had your courage from the beginning," she wrote. "It would have saved years of resentment and thousands in damages. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting what you've worked for. Some family members believe your success is a resource they're entitled to access. Proving them wrong is painful, but necessary." Her understanding and support were like a lifeline in a sea of disapproval. We arranged to meet for coffee the following weekend, rekindling a relationship that had once been important to both of us. Stephanie became my first ally in what had felt like an isolated position. Around the same time, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Dr. Levine helped me examine the patterns that had existed in my family for decades. The expectations placed on me versus those placed on Jason, the subtle and not so subtle ways my autonomy had been undermined, the assumption that my resources should be available to others without question. "What you're describing is common in families where one member achieves significant success," Dr. Levine explained. "There's often an unspoken expectation that the successful person should share the wealth without conditions, especially if there was a history of unequal treatment or favoritism. Setting boundaries feels like rejection to family members who have come to expect access to your resources." Through these sessions, I began to understand that my reaction wasn't merely about property rights, but about establishing myself as a full adult, deserving of respect and autonomy. The beach house incident was simply the most dramatic manifestation of a lifelong dynamic. 3 weeks into the silence, I received my first communication from a family member. It was a text from Laura. "The kids miss you. This situation is hard on everyone. Is there any way we could talk?" I agreed to meet her alone for lunch at a cafe halfway between the beach town and where they were temporarily staying with my parents. When she arrived, I was struck by how tired she looked, with dark circles under her eyes and a perpetual furrow between her brows. "Thank you for meeting me," she began after we'd ordered. "I want to apologize for my part in what happened. I should have insisted on talking to you directly before any plans were made." Her sincerity was evident, and I appreciated the straightforward apology. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." Laura sighed, pushing her salad around with her fork. "The thing is, I was desperate. Our rent had increased twice in 18 months. Jason's hours were cut, and we were falling behind. When your parents suggested the beach house solution, presenting it as already approved by you, it seemed like a miracle." This was new information. "My parents told you I had already agreed." She nodded. "They said they'd discussed it with you during a phone call, and you were fine with it as a temporary arrangement. I should have verified directly with you, but I was so relieved at the prospect of stability for the kids that I didn't question it." The revelation that my parents had explicitly lied rather than merely implied my consent was staggering. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an assumption, it was a calculated deception. "Where are you staying now?" I asked, genuinely concerned, despite my anger at the situation. "With your parents," Laura confirmed, grimacing slightly. "It's not ideal. The house is small, the kids are cramped, and there's constant tension. Jason and your dad argue frequently. Your mom is trying to mediate while also making passive-aggressive comments about you. It's stressful." I could imagine the pressure cooker atmosphere in my parents' modest home, with 2 additional adults and 2 children, suddenly added to the household. What's the long-term plan? I asked. Laura looked down at her barely touched lunch. That's part of why I wanted to talk. Jason is applying for jobs in this area now, but it's taking time. Your parents are helping with a security deposit for a new apartment, but we need to find something affordable. The hotel money you provided helped for those first days, but since then it's been challenging. I considered her situation carefully. Despite my anger at how things had unfolded, I didn't want my niece and nephew to suffer because of adult conflicts. I might be able to help with something temporary, I said cautiously. Not the beach house, but perhaps assistance with a short-term rental while you get back on your feet. Relief flooded Laura's face. That would be incredible. Just having some breathing room to find the right situation instead of taking the first available option would make such a difference. We spent the remainder of lunch discussing practical solutions. I offered to cover 2 months of rent for an apartment in their price range, giving them time to stabilize their situation. Laura accepted gratefully, emphasizing that she would make sure Jason understood this was assistance, with specific terms, not an open-ended arrangement. As we parted, Laura hesitated before asking, "Will you consider talking to your parents? They're hurt and angry, but I think they miss you too in their way." "I'm not ready yet," I admitted. The deliberate deception really shook my trust. I need time to process that. She nodded understandingly. For what it's worth, I think they've realized they crossed a line. Your mom hasn't mentioned the beach house in days, which for her is significant restraint. This tentative reconnection with Laura marked the beginning of a slow, cautious rebuilding process. While I maintained firm boundaries about my property and autonomy, I found ways to offer appropriate support that didn't compromise those boundaries. I researched housing assistance programs in their area and forwarded information to Laura. I set up college savings accounts for my niece and nephew, with clear stipulations that the funds could only be used for educational purposes. These actions allowed me to support the family members I cared about without enabling the dysfunctional patterns that had led to the conflict. Gradually, other communication channels began to reopen. Jason sent a terse but civil text, thanking me for helping with the apartment situation. My father left a voicemail about a tax document that had arrived at their house for me, his tone formal but not hostile. My mother was the last to break her silence. 6 weeks after the confrontation, she appeared unannounced at my primary residence in Minnesota. When I opened the door to find her standing there, I was momentarily speechless. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "I think it's time we talked." I invited her inside, offering tea, which she accepted with a nod. As we sat in my living room, an awkward silence stretched between us until she finally spoke. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "We shouldn't have entered your house without permission or moved things in after you said no. That was wrong." Her acknowledgement of the basic violations surprised me. "Thank you for saying that." She continued, her hands fidgeting with her teacup. "I still think you could have been more flexible about helping your brother, but the way we went about it was inappropriate." It wasn't a complete apology still containing justification for their expectations, but it was a significant concession from a woman who rarely admitted error. "Why did you tell Laura I had already agreed to the arrangement?" I asked directly. "That wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a lie." My mother's cheeks flushed. "We thought once it was underway you would accept the situation. You've always adapted to family needs in the past. We never expected such strong resistance." Her answer was revealing. They had counted on my historical pattern of yielding to family pressure, of prioritizing harmony over my own boundaries. The beach house confrontation had shattered those expectations, forcing a recalibration of our relationship. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. We discussed the patterns that had defined our family dynamics for decades, the different expectations placed on Jason and me, the assumption that my resources should be available to the family, while my boundaries could be disregarded. My mother listened more than she typically would, though she disagreed with many of my perceptions. "I never meant to make you feel less valued," she said at one point, genuine confusion in her expression. "We were harder on you because you were always more capable. Jason needed more support." "But that support came at my expense," I pointed out. And it created patterns that continue to this day where Jason expects to be rescued, and I'm expected to do the rescuing. We didn't resolve all our differences in that single conversation. Decades of established dynamics couldn't be transformed in an afternoon. But we established a foundation for a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than assumed compliance. As my mother prepared to leave, she asked tentatively, "Will you come for dinner next Sunday? Your father and I would like to continue this conversation. Jason and Laura will be there too." I considered the invitation carefully. "I'll come, but I need some assurances. This can't be an ambush or a group effort to pressure me about the beach house or any other support." "It won't be," she promised. "We just want to start rebuilding our family relationships, whatever form that takes going forward." I agreed to attend cautiously optimistic, but also realistic about the challenges ahead. Rebuilding trust would be a long, uneven process, with probable setbacks along the way. The family dinner was tense but civil, with careful navigation of sensitive topics. Jason was notably quieter than usual, occasionally contributing to general conversation, but avoiding direct discussion of the conflict. My father made an effort to ask about my current projects, showing more interest in my work than he had in years. These tentative steps toward reconciliation continued over the following months. Our relationship would never return to what it had been before the beach house incident, but perhaps that was for the best. The old dynamics had been built on unequal expectations and disregarded boundaries. Whatever emerged now would hopefully be healthier for everyone involved. Throughout this process, I maintained firm boundaries about my property and autonomy, while finding appropriate ways to offer family support. I helped Laura research better job opportunities and connected Jason with a friend's construction business that was hiring. I established clear guidelines for visits to my homes, including advance notice and explicit invitations. Some family members adapted to these new boundaries better than others. My father and Laura seemed to genuinely respect the changed dynamics, while my mother and Jason occasionally tested limits, though, with less entitlement than before. The beach house remained my private sanctuary, a symbol of both achievement and autonomy. Through therapy, reconnection with supportive friends and relatives, and careful reconstruction of family relationships, I gradually found peace with being labeled heartless for having boundaries. What some saw as coldness was actually self-respect and clarity. The true heartlessness would have been continuing patterns that ultimately harmed everyone involved. One year after the dramatic confrontation at my beach house, I sat on the deck watching the sunset over the ocean. The property had been completely reclaimed and restored to my vision, with no trace of the attempted invasion that had once threatened to transform it. More importantly, my sense of sanctuary in this space had been reclaimed as well. The past year had been transformative in ways I never could have anticipated when I first received that shocking call from Jason announcing they were moving in. What began as a boundary violation had ultimately led to healthier relationships and personal growth for everyone involved, even if the process had been painful. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something more balanced and adult. After months of difficult conversations and occasional setbacks, we had established a new understanding. They had come to respect my boundaries not just regarding my property, but in all aspects of our relationship. Our interactions were less frequent than before the conflict, but more meaningful and authentic. My father had surprised me with his willingness to examine the family patterns that had contributed to the beach house situation. During one particularly candid conversation, he admitted, "We did favor Jason. We thought we were helping him, but maybe we were actually holding him back by not expecting more." This acknowledgement had opened the door to discussions about how differently they had treated us throughout childhood, and how those patterns had shaped our adult lives. My mother found these conversations more challenging, but had made efforts to recognize her role in establishing the dynamics that led to the conflict. Jason's journey had perhaps been the most dramatic. After the initial fallout and period of anger, he had been forced to confront some difficult truths about his own sense of entitlement and financial irresponsibility. The apartment assistance I had provided came with conditions he needed to work with a financial counselor and develop a sustainable budget and career plan. Surprisingly, He had embraced these requirements with growing commitment. 6 months after the beach house incident, he secured a better paying position with a construction management company building on skills he had developed in various short-term jobs but never fully utilized. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was taking full responsibility for his family's financial security. During a rare one-on-one lunch 3 months ago, Jason had offered an apology that seemed genuinely reflective. "I've been thinking about how I've always expected you to bail me out," he said, looking uncomfortable but determined. "It wasn't fair to put the beach house situation on you, especially the way we did it." "What made you realize that?" I had asked, curious about his evolving perspective. "Honestly, watching how hard it's been to build financial stability from scratch. I've worked more consistently this year than ever before, and we're just now getting to a place where we're not living paycheck to paycheck. It's made me understand a little better what you must have done to afford that beach house in the first place." This new awareness didn't erase the history between us, but it created the possibility of a healthier relationship moving forward. We would likely never be extremely close, but we had found a way to interact with mutual respect rather than resentment and expectations. Laura and I had developed a surprisingly warm relationship through all of this. She had been the first to acknowledge the inappropriate nature of their actions and had worked consistently to repair the damage. She sent occasional updates about the children, with photos of school events and activities, keeping me connected to my niece and nephew without pressure or expectations. The professional aspect of my life had flourished as well. After the boundary setting required by the beach house situation, I found myself applying similar clarity to my business relationships. I became more direct about expectations and limitations, more confident in negotiating terms that worked for all parties. This approach led to several successful new investment partnerships and a significant expansion of my property portfolio. Perhaps most meaningful was the mentoring program I had developed for women interested in real estate investment. Drawing on both my financial expertise and my experience with establishing healthy boundaries, I created workshops that address not just investment strategies, but also the interpersonal challenges that often accompanied financial success, particularly for women. Financial boundaries are just as important as emotional ones. I would tell participants, sometimes they're the same thing. These sessions had grown from small gatherings of 5 or 6 women to sold-out events with waiting lists. The satisfaction of helping others navigate the complex intersection of money relationships and personal autonomy had become an unexpected passion. My own support network had expanded significantly as well. Reconnecting with my cousin Stephanie had led to introductions to other like-minded individuals who understood the challenges of maintaining boundaries while balancing family obligations. I had developed friendships with several neighbors at the beach house, creating a community that respected my space while providing connection when desired. The relationship that had perhaps grown the most, however, was my relationship with myself. Through therapy and reflection, I had come to fully appreciate the validity of my boundaries and needs. The labels that had once hurt selfish, cold, heartless no longer carried the same sting. I recognized them as defensive reactions from people uncomfortable with my self-determination, not accurate reflections of my character. As I watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks, I reflected on the true meaning of generosity. Genuine giving came from clear boundaries and free choice, not obligation or manipulation. By establishing firm limits on what I would accept, I had paradoxically become more able to give appropriately and meaningfully. I had helped Jason and Laura establish financial stability through targeted assistance rather than open-ended support. I had set up education funds for my niece and nephew with clear parameters. I occasionally invited family for short planned visits to the beach house on terms that respected everyone's needs and boundaries. These structured forms of generosity were more sustainable and ultimately more helpful than the boundaryless giving that had been expected of me before. The beach house itself had taken on new meaning. No longer just a symbol of financial achievement, it represented a pivotal moment of self-advocacy. Every room, every carefully chosen piece of furniture, every view of the ocean now reminded me of the strength it had taken to protect this space and what it represented. I had learned that protecting what you've worked hard to build is not heartless. It's an essential form of self-respect. That setting boundaries with family is not selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. That standing firm in the face of emotional manipulation is not cold. It's courageous. As darkness fell and stars began appearing above the ocean, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from that chaotic confrontation to this moment of clarity had been difficult but undeniably worthwhile. I had not only protected my physical property, but had also established my right to determine how I shared my resources, time, and space. Family relationships were complex, imperfect, and evolving. The bonds remained, but the terms had changed to something more equitable and respectful. Perhaps that was the greatest achievement of all, transforming conflict into growth, turning violation into an opportunity for necessary change. The beach house stood as my sanctuary, hard won and fully mine. But the true victory was internal: the confidence to maintain boundaries, the wisdom to offer appropriate support, and the peace that comes from living authentically, regardless of others' judgments or expectations. Has your family ever made assumptions about your property or resources? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and setting healthy boundaries. Remember, protecting what you've worked hard to build isn't selfish, it's essential self-care. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope my experience helps you find the courage to stand firm in your own boundaries.